Okay, great. So I was, while I pull up my sharing, I was considering making some proposals for changes today, but I've been talked out of it. And so instead, what I kind of want to do is talk a little bit about what our governance is today to kind of remind everybody, and then open it up for some discussions if people want to have discussions. Okay, so the current governance is a meritocratic governance model. It's not a democracy, so not everybody gets a vote. The way it is written down, which I put a link in the chat, and there's a link here as well, is that the people who contribute more get a vote, and the people who contribute less don't get a vote. And in practice, what we've been doing, and I think this is kind of why we chose this governance model a number of years ago, is that basically whoever's willing to do the work gets to do the work and make the decision. So that's the overarching governance model. In the model, or in the document, we have a couple of philosophy points for gem5. So the philosophy behind gem5, according to our governance model, is to further the state of the art in computer architecture, to balance the needs of academic researchers, industry researchers, and students, and to create a welcoming, open and transparent environment. Most of this governance model was lifted from the link at the bottom of the page here. That was where the model originally came from. So in our model, oh, sorry, any questions on this?
Only comments, but I guess we can push them to later if you prefer.
Sounds good. Okay, so we have in the model a set of roles and responsibilities. We have users who use gem5 and are part of the community. We have contributors, who are people who make commits, review patches, report bugs, answer questions, write documentation. Basically anything that's contributing to the community is a contributor. There are committers who can merge changes in GitHub. And according to our governance model, we can nominate, or a current committer can nominate a new committer, and then the PMC votes on whether to appoint them as a committer. Then there's the project management committee, which is, as defined in our governance model, a list of project owners and maintainers. Right now, the list is quite outdated. There are multiple lists out there, all of them are outdated. And officially, another PMC member can nominate a new PMC member, and the PMC has to unanimously vote to add them to the PMC. And then there's the PMC chair, which is voted on by the PMC and is in the role until they retire. Though there is a method for removing people from any of these things. And the PMC chair doesn't have any special power, only facilitates. The things in italics here are things that we basically never do. So it's been a long time since we've nominated new committers or nominated anyone to the PMC. So these are things that are written down but not followed very closely. So that's basically the whole governance in like 2 slides. In practice, so the governance was put into place sometime between 2015 and 2017, depending on how you look at it. This was a push that I started. So 10 years ago, I started this push for a governance model. I lifted the governance model from the meritocratic governance on that website I had a minute ago. And to give you a little bit of history, I chose that because it seemed closest to what we were already doing. I think it's actually been quite successful. Gem5, I think if you look at all the simulators or similar kinds of projects that were around 10 years ago to today, Gem5 is one of the most successful. And I think that's in part because of the governance that we have. But it's not perfect. So a couple of ways that I feel like we can improve things, or a couple of problems that I feel like we have, is that it's really hard to find people to take on work. I mean, I don't think this should be very surprising to anybody. We have trouble finding reviewers. We have trouble finding committers, contributors. We have a really difficult time finding people to manage infrastructure. So things like our testing machines, managing GitHub Actions, these kinds of things, etc. Basically, the work that is not pushing for our own research ideas is really hard to find people to do. So in practice, what's happened is that the small number of people who are willing to take on these kinds of things basically just do it. And the rest of the community is hands off. The other thing this has led to, in my experience, is that people in the community often find it much easier to say no to something than to take on work to improve something themselves or to even come up with a better proposal. And so as a personal frustration, we've often found ourselves in this position where we're conserving the status quo instead of trying to progress Gem5 forward. Those are some frustrations that I have, but I don't have any solutions. And I think that things have been working pretty well. And I'm not sure we really need much change. So with that, I want to kind of open up the floor. Giacomo, I want to hear what you have to say. But before I do that, there's one other thing that I should say, which is, I guess, a bit of an announcement. So as of a couple of months, almost 2 months, in 2 months from now, I'm going to be taking a position at Google. And at Google, I will still be doing Gem5 stuff. So I'm planning on continuing my role in the community, but doing it from within Google instead of Davis. So that's another reason why I'm thinking a lot about governance, is I want to make sure that the community continues in a positive direction like it has been, even as I'm changing roles. So with that, Giacomo, you have opinions. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so thanks, Jason. Well, first of all, good luck with your new endeavor. So yeah, I just took some notes while I was looking at the slides. And the thing that I want to comment first is about the meritocracy. And that is something that I also read in the governance page in the gem5.org website. Now, I think we need to be very clear on what we mean by meritocracy, because meritocracy per se is a very abstract word, and people can decline it according to their needs. Can basically say like, this is like meritocratic, or this is also meritocratic, and the two things can be like really opposite. So it really depends what you mean by that. So if you say like meritocracy means that if people are willing to do something, then they should have the power to do so, then that sort of like is fine. But then like the question is, let's say looks like, okay, so this conversation started after the release announcement, right? And UC Davis is able to do release. The question is, as an ARM employee or as a non-UC Davis person, can I do a release if I take the effort on doing the release? Like, is it possible for me to basically say, okay, in 1 week, I'm going to make a new release, and I'm going to add some feature that I particularly care. Myself only, not the community, just something that maybe it's important to ARM or it's important to some other partners, but in general. So that is basically the point. Like, can I actually do that? Because I'm not saying I fully agree with that. I don't think actually that's the right way to do. But even saying, okay, let's put it this way, can I actually make a release if I want to? And nobody can object to that.
So I think there's two parts here. I think what I've always understood the meritocracy to mean is actually, and this is a very much usually based on me and Jason's feeling about who's contributed what is when someone appears to be contributing regularly to Gem5 quality work, we will make them a maintainer with the power to review content and referee changes and maybe some other elevated kind of privileges through GitHub because we trust them basically. It's more like when we trust them, we give them elevated privileges. In terms of who can do what, in terms of like the release is a good example of this. We could sit down in forever and think of procedures in place for how someone could make a release. I think my honest answer is no one has ever came to me ever and asked for a release at all, or even anything like it. So if you came to me and said you want to make a release, I think I just have to sit down and think about how that works for us here, just purely from a logistical perspective. But I think
I understand. Sorry, Bobby, if I cut you short. But I mean, I think it was like a simple answer. Like, and let's have the hypothetical that you basically grant me or other people, and when I say other people, I mean like literally everybody who is actually willing to do the work. So even non-maintainers. But let's restrict to maintainers. If we get granted the capability to actually make release, do you envision, like, do you think it be preferable for a system where basically everybody can make a release if they have the power to do so?
I think there is power right now. It's very unwritten. However, there are powers that I think we have to have not distributed or available to everyone because it would just be chaotic.
So that's not meritocratic then.
But I think, do you want to get caught in the semantics here? Because I don't think that
really
really
No. It's very it's actually very simple. Like if you say that it's meritocratic because if people are willing to put the work, then they should have the power to do so. That's actually really unambiguous to me.
So I think actually in practice, Giacomo, if someone else, well, who is a maintainer who is part of our GitHub organization, anybody in that organization, I think, has full permission to create a release. Like, I don't think there's anything stopping anybody. And I think that we would actually, I mean, I would welcome somebody else doing a release instead of us doing it because it's a lot of work.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate the effort you're putting. What I'm saying is, okay, I don't know actually whether I'm really capable because I'm not sure whether I have access to your machines, and I've been out of the loop when it comes to making release. I've never done one, so I don't really know. So there might be something missing. I'm not even sure that I can do, but if you say I can't technically do that, that's fine. But say that I can do that. Do you think that's a preferable way of governing Gem5, where basically I can do a release even without asking for your opinion or something? Like I'm basically trying to say that most of the discussion actually came from the release, but not only the release. So do you think that's what Gem5 should head towards, like where other maintainers can also make releases if they want to, without consulting other maintainers first and PMC member first? And then the second question is, if that is the case, then what is the role of maintainers or PMC member if they don't get to say about, maybe we shouldn't do a release, or we should defer the release or whatever, everything about release management?
So, well, let me address the role of maintainers and PMC real fast, and then we can talk about releases. I think that the role, I think this should really be, we need to update these names. the governance annoyingly was still has a lot of references to the way review board works, and it wasn't even updated for Garrett. Let's see what the role of the maintainers in practice is that they click the merge button on GitHub. That's the only role. The role of the PMC in practice today is absolutely nothing.
All right.
And that's because no one has wanted to do anything else. I mean, me included, right? I have not taken, as PMC chair, I have not called a PMC meeting for over a year.
But effectively, that's what I'm saying. Like when you're saying that the PMC is not doing anything, what I propose and what I would like to see is basically then whenever we decide to actually make a release, we have like a PMC meeting, and in the PMC meeting, we actually discuss about the incoming release. And we have then already done that in the past. I remember in the PMC we were discussing about the release, and you were asking us whether there were some important features that we have shoved and that we were willing to actually push. So we have done that for major release, and I agree it has been very successful. So for me, that's a role for PMC members, to be fair.
So I'll push back in two ways on that. One is that the current makeup of the PMC, I don't think it's very well poised to make these kinds of decisions. But I do think the makeup of the maintainers and the people that attend to these meetings are well poised to make those kinds of decisions. So I would say I think that it's a good idea, but maybe we do that in these dev meetings instead of in the PMC.
Agreed. But sorry, I actually want to go back to the previous question because I think it has not been addressed explicitly. And to me, like it's a simple answer. Like it's whether like a yes or no. Do we want a collaboration environment where maintainers can make their own releases without consulting other maintainers?
So I'm going to give you a partial answer there. But when I started working on the project, I sat down and wrote out what the release procedures were, and I don't think there's fully a mechanism for other people to do them, but I tried to make it very democratic, procedural, thing like posting a mailing list, asking for if anyone's got any input, blah, blah. Very much along the lines of what you want in terms of PC meetings and discussing this. And I think the thing is, a lot of these procedures didn't seem to give the community anything they wanted. It was something that I thought would be an opportunity for them to come in and say something and do something. In the end, it didn't deliver any value. And a lot of these, I honestly, after a while, goes, well, okay, I won't poll the community of whether they want this release because no one responded to that email anyway. Our current de facto governance model is being molded based on what people tend to want to influence gem5 in some capacity. And the reason we don't have any mechanism for people to do releases, no one seems to care about making their own release. They just want to know what
I do care in the sense that I don't believe anybody should make their own release. That's like my second step of the point. But I want to understand whether that's where you are actually want to go. But I agree. The reason why people are not trying to do that is actually like a virtuous thing. Like I believe people should not be wanting to make their own release without informing other people.
I just don't want to create a huge, bureaucratic, for lack of another word, where we have a very thought out constitution for the project. And actually, it's kind of bloat and it's work for us.
It's not bureaucratic at all. It's about having a single meeting, like a developers meeting. I think what I'm proposing is a very simple system. Like before we make a release, we have a Gem5 developers meeting where maintainers should attend, and we're basically saying, what do you think? Let's discuss. I mean, lots of times, lots of time in one of these meetings, we don't even have an agenda, and there is no topic because nobody wants to present something. So it's not that we don't have time to discuss releases. It's not a heavy bureaucratic process.
I want to ask a clarifying question. Are you using releases as an example, or is it specifically releases that you have a problem with in the governance? And
it's an example, but it's an important example.
It's because I don't mind having a particular thing. Okay, because releases are obviously kind of regular, special. Like we're always going to have them, of having some sort of procedure in place. So as you say, other people can suggestions, stuff. I would be very cautious of people being able to block them, because I find if we give people blocking powers, they can be a bit abused. But you know, we can figure out something. But I worry about making everything too structured to the point that it's going to be me, but where I'll say we're wasting a lot of time doing these kind of procedures, and I find no one's ever used these procedures anything but one way, and everyone thumbs up everything, and these meetings are poorly attended, and no one replies to the emails, and no one blah blah. It's just, you know, right now Gem5 is a bit ad hoc. It is a bit me at my computer deciding things and seeing if anyone like says no, but it is a lot flexible and it's a lot more efficient with at least my bandwidth.
Of course, it's very efficient when basically people do stuff without asking opinions from other people. I understand that in this way, if you look at the metric on how much work you get done, of course, that's the best way. And similarly works for code reviews, right? I mean, I would be very proficient and I will make like 2 times in the patches if nobody was reviewing my code. But I just don't believe that's a sane way to handle the thing. And again, like I like you, like I also am against heavy bureaucratic process. But what I'm proposing is not heavy bureaucratic. It's something that we are already doing for major releases. We've been doing this. So do you think that just adding this thing for every release? I mean, I'm not saying like for hotfixes. Even we can discuss about it. Like for hotfixes, I'm fine. But if you're making, sorry.
I am totally fine doing anything. I've taken on board that you want more, at least more information, more heads up meetings about releases, and that I'll take on board, and that we can incorporate into the governance model. But you know, as I said before, I want to clarify whether this is a more general point, as can anyone do anything? What are the permissions of our system?
So, can I? Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I think that we are in agreement about releases, and putting in the governance model that it will be discussed at a developer meeting, I think is a good idea. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. What I think Bobby's pushing back a little bit on, and I see where he's coming, is that it's difficult to know as someone who has elevated privileges in GitHub, so not necessarily the roles and responsibilities, but with the practical elevated privileges. It's hard to know what in our governance model we should be doing and what is okay to ignore, because there's so much that's written down that is ignored.
But that's why I think it's very useful to have this sort of developers meeting where we basically discuss on what we think is best for the community. I don't think we should basically believe that the governance page is the verb and cannot be altered. I think
I'll give you an example. If I'm deciding I'm going to use a server at UC Davis to spin up some more test runners, now, you know, if we're totally doing like governance, should like I did raise that? Does anyone have any objections? Blah blah. Or should I just go do it? You know, it's sort of like there's lots of decisions like that every single day, all the time. And okay, and the way that things work now, it's just basically I'll kind of protest a little bit and say our procedures I've worked for 5 years without very, very much complaint. We get most of the stuff done. Most people think things. Most people don't feel powerless in a project. They can get things done when they want to get things done. So so it does work. But you know, giving people the levers exposing all these levers so anyone can pull at any time just to show that we're meritocratic, it's more work for us, and it feels to me like a kind of organizational bloat in some capacity. And is anyone going to protest to me using a server to spin up more runners, because that's technically a decision the project has to make, and it's on me. There's a lot. I worry about it getting out of hand with
Well, I mean, I worry about a different thing, Bobby. I mean, I think that worry is reasonable. But I also worry about the difficulty is not knowing what is important and what isn't important. Right? Because I think the release is actually a really good example. If you go through that document that you wrote on releases, Bobby, that Bobby wrote, on most releases, we only do a fraction of what it says. And I think what happened with the minor release that was going to happen but isn't happening now is that some of the other things we said we would do, we didn't do. And so it's difficult to know out of the list of things we said we were going to do, which ones are actually important and which ones are not important. So I guess I don't know exactly what I'm advocating for, but maybe what we need to do is go back and try to remove a lot of the details from these documents. And so that maybe we should remove the PMC from the governance, since we never use the PMC now. Maybe we should remove everything from the release documentation except for we discuss it at a developers meeting.
I would like to raise the point here that one of our problems also, we've always got procedures to add people to the maintainers and PMC. We should have procedures for people moving out, and it shouldn't just be asking them if they still want to be a member. It should be based on their contribution and worth, because I think that has become a bit of a problem at points.
Yeah. So, Giacomo, do you understand what I'm saying? Does my point make sense to you?
I have to say, not.
I mean,
not in detail. I think there is a disagreement, a philosophical disagreement, and the disagreement for me is that I know I shouldn't be saying that, but I don't particularly care about. I mean, I know it might sound harsh, but I don't particularly care about what's written on a document, in the sense that a document should just document what we actually believe is good for governance and for release. So if you say that there is something that shouldn't be there in the release page or whatever, fine, let's remove it. But to me, it's not important, and it can be a bit misleading to focus too much on what is written on those documents. Those documents should just follow our own agreement, the agreement of the community. So that's why I don't particularly follow what you're saying.
Okay. Yes. No. I think we're in. I definitely fully agree with what you're saying there. And my point is that right now the documents don't do that. The documents have usually more procedure than the community necessarily needs. And so we should probably change these documents.
Again, it's fine by me, provided that basically the content of the documents basically reflect what we believe is best for the community. So I have nothing against that.
I think it's what I'll push back on is I don't think we should expect behavior in the community that's not written down in a document.
I disagree with that. I think a document cannot cover everything, and I think new situation might arise, and it's impossible to cover them fully, as Bobby was saying. Like, even if we basically regulate what we do during a release, and probably we should, because a release is a major thing, there can be some other details which we can call minor, like the example Bobby made, like adding new servers and whatever. Like, should we also cover that case? Like, new technology will arise, new situations, and I think it's impossible for a single document to cover fully. So what is more important to me is that we share the same vision and the same philosophy when it comes to collaboration. And that's why I think these meetings are actually very useful. And in a way, they basically supplement whatever work we would normally do with like the PMC or whatever.
I've also just this is it's not really directly chains on from Jacko's comment, but I also want to say in terms of governance and how we review PRs. I don't know exactly what the solution to this would be, but I think we've all had this point in Gem5 where we are a good decision for the project is blocked in some capacity due to yeah, basically these sorts of procedures. I'm thinking like basically I'll give you an example because it was a while ago, and I think the people that complained about it aren't in this call. I wanted to get rid of some of the ISAs that are pretty underused and we don't really maintain in any capacity, like MIPS, for example. And it was just basically like vetoed out of decision making because I actually don't know who it was, but a couple people on the PMC kind of just said, well, you know, it's just nice to have in there, so we'll keep it in there. And I'm the one doing the maintaining mostly. I know that these things are running away and are of little value to the community anymore, but it's vetoed by people who poke their nose in, and maybe it's their code and maybe they have some allegiance to it. And you know, and the same thing with the C++ formatting, the client formatting as well. It continued to get kind of vetoed by people jumping in and go, no, actually, and they weren't doing the work, you know, and they weren't, and it was in the end completely counterproductive, so they ended up doing nothing. I don't know what I really don't know what the procedure is for that, but that's something in our governance and how we referee things that I find very frustrating.
Okay, so I think there are two valid examples. Of course, on the ISA, I cannot comment because I work for a company that has specific ISA. So if at some certain instance I didn't comment, is because to me there's like a sort of conflict of interest. Maybe I'm being too paranoid on that perspective, so it's difficult for me to comment, even though I have my own opinion. In general, there are some cases where the veto does not particularly make sense, but I think that's physiological. In some cases, actually having a veto is actually a good thing. And think about like code reviews, right? So when you say, and this was part also of the slide, when basically things adding more time because they basically get some pushback from some people. Sometimes, and honestly, maybe I'm naive, but I believe like most of the times, not every time, of course, this comes from someone who actually believes that's not the optimal solution and basically is pushing for having a better one, if that solution is actually achievable, of course. And while this may make like more expensive to follow that advice in the short term, that might mean like spending less time afterwards. So there are the hidden costs of pushing solution that has some problems and might basically create some problems for you or for everybody in the future. So what I'm saying is, sorry, I'm just wrapping up. Like I honestly believe what you're saying, that some of the times there are some vetoes that don't make much sense and slow you down. What I'm saying is that it's physiological, and I think we should leave. Like the problem is when this veto becomes pathological, where like every time someone tries to do something, then there is a strong pushback. Like most of the times, that's pathological. but I honestly don't believe that's the situation.
What would be your hypothetical? What would be your so imagine I push PR that says, okay, I'm getting rid of MIPS. No one comments on this, and then one person jumps in, someone who is maintainer, and says, no, I believe MIPS should be in. I like it. I'm going to block it. Now,
That's
in my
actually a good.
and like in my mind, there's one member who doesn't want it, and everyone else de facto is neutral / accept in the sense nothing's worthy of comment on this PR. Besides, so they're clearly they've clearly seen it. It's like, oh, this doesn't offend me. Maybe it doesn't interest them that much either. Move on. I feel like these situations do come up a bit more. And your example of someone jumping in and saying, oh, there's like a better way of doing this. That
So
can be.
can I?
Yes,
sorry to interrupt. I think that there's a bit of a different problem. And that's that it's really difficult to gauge the consensus in the community around things because there's very little participation from the community. Right. I mean, if we look at the attendees today, we have attendees from 4 different affiliations, which is a tiny fraction of the community. If you look at comments on PRs, 99% of PRs get 1 review. And so it's, again, it comes down to this thing of like who's doing the work. And, the claim format, I think, is a good example of this. A lot of people have done a lot of work on that. And then someone comes in and says, I don't like this, but isn't willing to actually step up and fix it the way that they want. And so right now it gets blocked. And maybe if we were more of a pure meritocracy, it wouldn't get blocked.
I mean, it'd be great if we could poll everyone in the gem5 community every single time we need to make a decision like that, but we can't, and I think that's part of it as well. Well, that is the same problem. It's, one guy saying no somehow in our model becomes the community says no. When I know for a fact it's not really that case in reality.
So I'm gonna push back a bit on this, even if I understand your point, and I agree that it can be frustrating at times. The reason why I'm pushing back is, so let's take about the MIPS ISA example. So in the past, we already removed ISAs, and in some cases where there was a disagreement, for example, I don't know, like between myself and Gabe or something, what I would do is basically add other maintainers to the conversation and basically sort of vote the solution and basically say, hey, I believe this should be this way. Do you mind if we loop in other maintainers? Like, of course, like asking that. So whenever there is like a 1 versus 1, if we add other maintainers to the conversation and basically ask for their opinion, like lots of time I've done that, adding JSON or whatever. So I'm not saying it will fix all the instance. It does not fix the problem if you have a single maintainer that like strongly beats and like, no, I don't care what other maintainers are thinking. I believe this is the right thing. But I believe that most of the times, if there is like a sort of consensus, like unanimous -1 consensus, that should actually work out. So this is about the thing. And about the meritocracy, again, like it also depends what you mean. If the meritocracy is just for people who do things, it's one thing. But I could also argue meritocracy can be for someone that actually knows the simulator or that piece of code very well. So I know the ARM part quite well at this point, I would say. If someone comes and develops something and is saying, no, this is not the best way to do that, and there are some problems. Now, it's not just because the person has done, even if it is like a big pull request, and the person saying, no, actually, this is meritocratic. I have like the thing to say, well, okay, but because I've been spending so much time in that particular subsystem, then for me, meritocracy means that because I know how it works, then I can probably tell you. And that's the idea behind maintainers. I don't think maintainers are people who have committed lots of code. But maintainers are people who know the code, who have maybe reviewed a lot of the code, and knowing the code sometimes is more important than adding the code, right? So
yeah, agreed. So let's try to wrap this up. I think that's been a really good discussion. Before we do that, we've heard a lot from me and Bobby and Giacomo. What about the rest of the community that's on the call? Does anybody else want to throw their opinion in the ring?
Come on, let's have some controversy. Someone say something completely outlandish. No, okay.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of things that have come out of this conversation. So one is specific to releases. We will update our release procedure, or I will update our release procedure to say to maybe reframe some of the things about posting on the mailing list and say and instead talk about the developers meeting. I think that's a really good idea. I'm strongly behind it, and so I will create a PR that has that change, and we can review it.
sorry, Jason, with respect to that, I discussed this with Richard, which is here, and he basically came up with a possible solution for basically relieving the burden on making a release for Bobby. So it's a proposal. I can comment on the PR, or if you want, we can catch up whenever you want. I think this might simplify the release process.
Do you or Richard just want to make a PR and we can comment on it there?
Yeah. Yep.
I would be happy to not have to make the PR because I'm very busy right now. We have finals coming up next week. Okay, that's even easier for me. So that's one thing. So the other thing is generally with the governance. I'm hesitant to volunteer to make changes. Mostly because I don't want to, because I'm a little lazy. And yeah, I don't know if we want to make deeper changes right now.
Well, there's a meta point is what is the procedure for making changes to the governance model?
Well, the procedure to making changes to the governance model is just a PR.
I know, I mean, well, yeah, but can me and you just push a PR, and as soon if we get 2 maintainers, we just do it, But yeah.
But my point is actually, I also agree we shouldn't be making changes from a formal point of view. My point is, I believe that the governance has shifted from how it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where I believe maintainers and PMC people were kept in the loop more when it comes to release. So depends what you mean by changes. Honestly, what I'm basically proposing is like to just try, not everything that we were doing 5 years ago was actually wrong. I believe the fact that the maintainers were basically discussing together and choosing together. I mean, honestly, the releasing process, maintainers did very little, all other than propose whatever they were working at. I think no maintainer ever said like, no, we shouldn't be making a release. So I'm also not proposing to change anything, to be fair. I'm just proposing to we have maintainers, let's use them to basically discuss releases in the developers meeting, especially when we don't have anything on the agenda for a developers meeting. I think it's a good filler. So actually, I don't want people to do extra work. I just want to convey my point of view. And my point of view is that Gem5 would really benefit from being a bit more structured, like gently structured when it comes to the release process.
I think we take that on board, and we can. I think what we're really doing more 5 years ago compared to now is really just disseminating the information as we are doing. Like we would say, hey, we're going to do the staging branch in 2 weeks. Hey, we're going after this, we're going to do the release. Hey, we're doing this is a list of PRs that are going to get in, and often no one would say anything, but it was disseminated. And we can do that. I prefer to do that more through these dev meetings, but we could also send out emails or post on the discussions whatever channel. I take it on board. I hope next release you will see more of that. And yeah.
I have a quick question while we're talking about these kinds of things, and I have people here. Is there consensus in this room? Maybe I'll flip it around since everyone's really quiet and ask. Let me know if there's any objection to cleaning our maintainers and dropping people who haven't contributed in the past year. Contributed includes making any posts on any gem5 forums or any commits, or attending the meetings.
If you remove someone and they say, I don't want to be removed, you're just going to ignore them?
I mean, we're talking about like Steve Reinhardt and Ali Saidi, which I don't think either of which will have any opinion on being removed.
Okay, but I'm just wondering if someone says, hey, no, I want to be maintainer because it's cost them
so
nothing.
The problem is that if we do that, we're going to be down to 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 maintainers.
I think that's effectively how many they are in practice.
Right.
So
is there any objections? Okay.
I'm okay.
Any objections to me sending out a poll for not self-nominations for maintainers? It would be great if maybe
what
some
about
people,
that? Sorry.
To send out a poll to self-nominate to become a maintainer.
Cool.
And we just do this in the next meeting, go through like as the.
Yeah, I mean, there's many people in this call who have done a lot of great contributions who are not maintainers right now. Just to double check, Giacomo, you did not have an objection to that?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay. Cool. So I'll take on these 2 things as well. Okay. One other announcement. We have a gem5 workshop that's going to be at ISCA. Please submit things and tell other people at your institutions who use gem5 to submit things. The deadline is like May 1st. So you have a month and a half. And it's a long way away, but if you want to visit Tokyo, it's a good excuse. Does anybody have anything else? Giacomo, thank you so much for the care that you have for the community and for pushing on this. I think it's, yeah, thank you.
Thanks to you.
And thanks everybody for, I don't know, listening to us discuss it for an hour. Okay, great. We'll end there. We'll send out the AI generated summary of the discussion. We'll post it on the discussion page in gem5 on GitHub after this. I will see you all. Actually, I might not see you next month, but in 2 months, I'll definitely see you. So, bye everybody.